everybody and welcome back to another video by Funlearn Tutorials. Continuing with the Jones 1971 model that we had discussed as a brief extension of the Jones 1965 model with sector specificity introduced in the model. We have already discussed the production side equations which are similar to those discussed in the 1965 model with slight modification so as to incorporate the sector specificity, as you can understand from this term that is being used in the first equation. Now we move on to the consumer side. So essentially, when you consider the consumer side, one thing you need to notice is if you look at the number of factors of production. So in this case you have three factors of production. If you go back to the 1965 model, you had two factors of production, L and K, which is why in the consumer side you had two equations, that is L and K. So for every factor of production you have one balance equation which essentially gives you the total amount of labor of the factor that is being distributed based on the sectors that are present in the economy. Now for the Jones 1971 model, as you can see, there are three factors of production: land, labor and capital. So as you can guess, in the consumption side we'll have three equations. So let's just write the equations. Now labor, here labor, let me assume that labor endowment, that is the total labor supply or the population of the economy, is given as L bar. That L is being distributed within the agricultural sector and the manufacturing sector. There is perfect capital mobility, so essentially these factor equations can also be thought of as the factor mobility equations. So part of it is going to the agricultural sector, which is given by ALAXA. So we have one part of L bar, which is ALAXA. This is the amount of labor that is moving into the agricultural sector. There is another component of this L bar which is moving into the manufacturing sector, which is ALMXM. So we have another component of the labor factor, which is ALMXM. Essentially this equation gives you the idea that labor is mobile between the agricultural sector and the manufacturing sector, and that gives you the labor balance equation, which is essentially the third equation of our 1971 setup. Now there are two other factors considered in our model. We have the sector specific land, which is used only in the agricultural sector, and we have the sector specific capital, K bar, which is essentially the advanced capital as opposed to the backward capital used in the agricultural sector. This capital K is used only in the manufacturing sector. So if you take a look at T on this side, the arrow is only in the agricultural sector, which means, as I have written here, recall that ATA can be defined based on the definitions of AIJ input coefficients that I had considered. ATA would be the amount of land required to produce 1 unit of output in the agricultural sector. So that is why I have incorporated ATA, and since there's a total of XA units of agricultural output being produced, I'll read a total of ATA XA for my entire agricultural output. So the entire capital land input is being usurped by the agricultural sector. So we have ATA into XA, which gives you the straightforward basic balance equation for land. Similarly, you have one for capital again. As similar to the land feature, you also have the capital, which is sector specific to the manufacturing sector, which means the entire capital is being used by the manufacturing sector, and that is why in the K term you have just one equation, which is AKMXM. Let me just write it properly, AKMXM. So that the land equation gives you the fourth equation and the capital equation gives you the fifth equation. So as you can compare with the 1965 model, in the 1965 model there were two sectors. So we had A sector and M sector. Now if you look at the production side of the equations, which is equation 1 and 2, you have PA and PM. So you can realize that from the production side, the number of sectors in the economy gives you the equations on the production side. Similarly, the number of factors that are being involved in the economy, L and K, gives you the number of equations on the consumer side. Since we had two factors of production, we just have 3 and 4, which are the balance conditions for L and K. But if you look at the 1971 model, there are two sectors as similar to the 1965 model. So you also have two equations in the production side. You have PA and PM, one for each sector. But here you have three factors of production. So you have three factors of production to be balanced. So you have L, T and K on the consumption side of the model. So essentially you can think of it in this way. If there are K number of sectors in the economy, so if there are K sectors, so if K let me just use a different notation so as to not get confused with the capital. If there are S sectors in the economy, then from the production side you will get S equations. And if there are a total of F factors of production, then from the factor side or from the consumption side you will get F equations. So essentially there will be a total of S plus K equations. This is a very basic observation that is to be noted. So if you know about these numbers, you can realize how many equations that you will have. Now let me just mention one more thing. If you know from the theory of simultaneous equations, if you have m number of suppose you have m number of unknowns to be determined from a system of simultaneous equations, you need to have m number of equations. So let me just talk about that for once. In the Jones 1965 model, what were the unknowns? Let me just write down the unknowns that were to be incorporated here. I am producing some amount of agricultural output as an agricultural producer, but I will have to ensure that I am going by the zero profit condition, which means I still don't know how much amount I will be producing. That means XA is still an unknown to me. Let me just change the color of this font so that you know that I am adding it afterwards. Let me put it blue. Right. So XA is an unknown to the economy. Similarly, going by the same logic, XM is also unknown in the economy. So these are the two outputs that are yet to be determined based on the zero profit condition. Again, we also have the two factor prices that are to be determined endogenously from within the system. So here we have R and W that are to be determined from within the system, that is endogenously. So essentially there are four unknown variables that are to be determined, and as you can recall in the Jones 1965 model there were four equations. So you have equation 1, 2, 3 and 4 that are to be used to determine the value of these four unknowns. Now if you go to the Jones 1975 model, Jones 1971 model, you will realize that there are 5 equations. So there must be 5 unknowns as well. Coming back, we can understand that the two outputs that are not known are XA and XM, which are similar to the 1965 model. But here there are 3 factors, which means there are 3 factor prices. So we also have R, capital R, along with small r and small w that is to be determined. So we have 2 outputs of the 2 sectors and the 3 factors of production. Again, as you can realize, the number of sectors will be equal to the number of outputs that are to be determined, and the number of factors will give you the number of factor prices that are to be determined. So you will have S number of outputs to be determined and not K, let me just reframe that, it will be F. So S number of sector outputs to be determined and F number of factor prices to be determined. So there will be a total of S plus F unknowns as well as S plus F equations. So there will always, if you can properly set up the structure, there is expected to be, the model is expected to be determinable. That is, you can solve all the equations to determine the values of these unknowns. And that essentially sort of gives you the basic structure of the Jones 1965 model and the Jones 1971 model. There can be several extensions of these model. You can incorporate different types of factors. You can decide on whether you want which factors to be mobile across sectors, which factors you want to be sector specific. You can essentially join 2 or 3 models and you can overlap them. There are concepts of nuggets to be incorporated, and that essentially gives you the different extensions of the Jones model, and you can develop thereafter. So I will be introducing some extensions of these models. We will be considering certain production structures where we can use these ideas and develop the basic ideas. But before that, we shall be looking at some applications of how we can use these structures to determine what will happen given certain circumstances. Essentially, we'll be considering certain comparative static exercises. What will happen when price of a good increases, what will happen when the supply of a particular endowment increases. That will give us certain theorems, and that will help us understand what happens in the real life. So that essentially is the format, and now we'll go on to the comparative statics for different setups. First, of course, the Jones 1965 model, and then the Jones 1971 model. See how the comparative static results vary across these two models, and we'll take on after it subsequently. Thank you.